I was born just late enough that my childhood consisted mainly of the Nintendo Wii and DS, and I didn't really care for much that had come before those. That's kind of just me as a person though. I'm not the kind of person to voluntarily go back to something that's come out a long while ago, even if it is from a company or a person I really like. That's part of the reason why I never owned a Game Boy or Game Boy Advance. I was born too late for it to be a modern system during my childhood, and I really had no desire or real reason to want one. And that kind of still holds true, which is weird because as a child, I really wanted a GameCube, and even up to a few years ago, I really wanted an N64. So the GBA is kind of an outlier in that sense. Even earlier this year when the Anbernic RG35XX SP released, I would have gotten one if y'all wanted me to, but I really didn't care for the Game Boy Advance SP inspiration. Which is weird because it was Nintendo's first clamshell device and the device that really kickstarted their whole clamshell line that I've loved so dearly. But that all ends because I finally have a Game Boy Advance SP. Kinda. Yeah, I just alluded to it a few seconds ago, but this is not the Game Boy Advance SP. This is the Anbernic RG35XX SP, another device in their 35XX line of systems. All these numbers get confusing. It's not new. Like I said earlier, it released a while back. It released back in June. But I just got it recently and wanted to make a video on it regardless. Just to get this out of the way, the link to the AliExpress page of this device in the description is an affiliate link that will help support the channel. Obviously, you don't have to use it, but I really would appreciate it if you do decide to pick one up after this review, because like I said, it helps support the channel. And it's currently on sale for just $43, which is a steal in my opinion. But that's neither here nor there. Let's get back to the actual review. It's kind of insane just how much I've fallen in love with this thing since I've gotten it. Anbernic's devices are very hit or miss for me, and while I have loved their previous 35XX devices, they've never been my absolute favorite to use. The original 35XX and 35XX Plus were great alternatives to the device that they copied, the Miyoo Mini, but the devices that have released since, like the Miyoo Mini Plus and the Trimmer Y Brick, have kind of left them in the dust. So imagine my surprise when I get this thing, start using it, and absolutely love it. Some of you may not know that the 3.5 in all of the names of these devices is their screen size, meaning this thing has a 3.5 inch 480p IPS LCD display, which yes, isn't the highest quality screen in the world, but really think about what games you're going to be playing on here. The newest console you can play on here is the DS, and that thing has a screen display of 256 by 192. So you're not missing out on quality here. I've mainly been playing Golden Sun for the GBA on here, and it looks absolutely amazing. There are a lot of settings you can change within RetroArch or whatever emulator you decide to use, but I've mainly been sticking with the default settings for all of these games, and they look really good regardless. The controls on here also feel really good. The previous 35XX devices had pretty mushy controls, and that's not to say that they were bad, but on devices like these with such small controls, I really love having clicky buttons, and this thing delivers in that regard. There aren't many controls on here, so there really isn't much I can say, but they do feel really nice for what they are. The D-pad and face buttons are really clicky and responsive. There's no question of whether you actually did or did not hit an input, because you will know the second that you do. The triggers on the back are also very clicky. They feel fine, nothing extraordinary, but I really like them, so that's all that really matters. The only downside I can see people having about these controls is how loud they are, because they are loud. When I said you'll know the second you hit a button, it's because you are definitely going to hear the click sound it makes. I personally don't really care, and I think it's a good enough trade for good feeling controls, but I can see some people being upset about this, so keep that in mind if you plan on picking one up. Aside from that, this thing feels really great in the hands. I have big hands, and devices that are flat or small really aren't my favorite because of how little space my hands have to sit, but this thing is different because of how thick the bottom portion is. I can wrap my hands around the bottom portion and play for hours no problem. It probably will become a little uncomfortable if I'm playing for a really long period of time, but I haven't encountered that So for me, it's a win. Overall though, the controls feel really good. They're nothing groundbreaking or innovative, but for a line of systems that has had pretty mediocre controls up until now, this thing hits it out of the park. Before we talk about emulation and the whole software side of this thing, I want to more in-depthly talk about the design, because this is very easily my favorite Game Boy Advance styled handheld I've ever used. Yes, that is Pocket Microshade. If you've watched my last video talking about my favorite handheld emulators of 2024, you'll know that I love this thing and the design has a lot to do with that. I've always loved clamshell handhelds, but the recent devices we've seen from Powkitty and Retroid have put a bad taste in my mouth. So it's great to see that a company has finally come in and done it right. The GameBoy SP was and still is a very beautifully designed device. The clamshell form factor made it so easy to carry around because you didn't need any cases or accessories. You could just throw it in a bag and not have to worry about the screen getting scratched or the device getting damaged. Just throw it in with it closed. It's perfectly fine. And this thing is the exact same. Now, I am a very carefree and clumsy person, so I was kind of just doing that with all of my devices before this, but it's nice to know that I don't have to worry about anything happening to this device if I were to put it away closed. What's really amazing and kind of ties the hardware and software together is that this thing automatically goes into sleep mode when you close it. Sometimes. Yeah, it happens very rarely, but there are times when I'll close this and it just won't go into sleep mode. I think it depends on how fast you close it. If I close it too slow, it might just not. It's weird. Jumping ahead a little bit, talking about emulation, DS games don't go into sleep mode in this thing, which is disappointing, but it does use a different emulator than literally everything else on this device, so it probably has something to do with that. But aside from that, this is so great. Sure, for other devices, I can just press the power button and it goes into sleep mode, but nothing quite beats the charm of being able to close a device and it being where you left it if it's charged. Yeah, the battery's 3300 milliamp hours, which isn't bad. It lasts an okay amount of time, and in sleep mode, I'd say you'd be lucky to get about a day of battery life. I learned this the hard way when I accidentally left this thing in sleep mode in the car that my brother then took to Pennsylvania. It died in the middle of my Golden Sun game, and the save file corrupted. That was awesome. I wasn't too far into the game, so it wasn't that much of a loss, but it was very annoying to finally get the device back after like a day and a half, just to realize that I need to play through that whole thing because the save file corrupted and I lost all of my data, and it was very annoying. So just be careful not to leave it in sleep mode for too long. It's a really cool feature, and if you're only going to leave it like that for a few minutes or even a few short hours, you should be perfectly fine. But I would recommend just going into the menu and turning it fully off so that you don't lose any data and don't lose any battery, like I unfortunately did. But moving on from that, the base Anbernic OS is really good now. It's nothing extraordinary, but it is the exact same as the other 35XX devices, and I like it. It's functional, has a bunch of settings you can change, and is just a very suitable front end for all of your games. It's nothing spectacular, and I can't really say much more, mainly because there really isn't much to say in the first place, but I like it, and it works really well. So that's that. Emulation on here isn't anything super impressive, especially if you've seen other 35XX devices, but I still think it's really cool, especially because of how the software plays into all of it. I'm not sure if this is a more recent update to their OS or what, but now automatic borders show up whenever you play a game for most systems. This is just a cool novelty that some will like and some will turn off, but the one border that I want to talk about the most is the Game Boy Advance SP border, because I love it so much. I feel kind of dumb for being so excited for this, but it is really cool and makes it feel that much more authentic, even if it's nowhere close to being so. It's just another level of charm that I really appreciate, because these companies usually don't put that much work into these things, and seeing that they went in and set it up so that the GameBoy SP border would be enabled by default and works really well, it's just really cool. And I appreciate it a lot. But back to emulation. I know I mentioned earlier that I've mostly been playing Golden Sun for the GBA, and that is true, but I have been going in and testing out a lot of different systems, and they all run pretty well. Well, most of them do. N64 runs, but games will have weird graphical glitches that aren't uncommon for low-power devices like these. Like this Mario 64 one is one I've seen on a lot of other devices. And besides that, using a D-pad to control games that are usually controlled with a joystick is not optimal, as I'm sure you can guess. It's not a horrible experience, but it just feels weird. I mostly stick to 2D games because it feels kind of unnatural for me, but you'd be perfectly fine playing any N64 game on here. Please just don't buy it for that. Buy this thing if you're looking for a device that can play emulators up to DS games, or if you're looking for a device that is designed after the GameBoy SP. because this thing is excellent in both of those regards. I've been using charm to describe this thing a lot throughout this video because I think a lot of things about it are very charming, but I don't want to reduce it to just that. Its build quality is very solid, the controls feel really nice, the screen is great for how small and overused it may be, and the whole design copying the GameBoy SP is really cool, and I think it's just an awesome device. I really thought the device that was going to get me to play all of these retro games was going to be the Aya Neo Pocket Micro, but here I am playing on a device with not a perfect resolution screen, not as high quality of a screen as the Pocket Micro, and it's still at least $150 cheaper. It's fascinating. But yeah, I really love this thing and I'm probably going to keep using it for the foreseeable future. Most of the time when I review a device, I use it long enough to make the review, but then afterwards it kind of just goes in the box or bin where the rest of the devices I've reviewed go. But I don't see that happening for this thing. I just love it so much and it's so convenient to carry around because of the clamshell form factor. I love it. But what do you guys think? Do you have one of these and love it as much as I do? Or do you think it looks stupid and don't want to buy one? Or do you think it's not as powerful as you might like? Let me know in the comments down below, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.